The United States set out to bomb Japan thinking they were ending a war and saving lives. They did end the war, but at what cost? The United States traumatized an entire nation that would never go back to the way it was before. Japan lost all of its military power after their surrender. The Emperor of Japan no longer had any political power. He was just a puppet pretending he still ruled the country. The Japanese citizens suffered both physical and mental health problems due to the effects of the bomb, and the people had to witness their homes destroyed along with many of their friends. The United States made the decision to use the nuclear bombs developed through the Manhattan Project on Japan after the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor, United States naval base. The bombs were designed for use against Germany, but Germany surrendered before the United States had the chance to use them. The fat man and the little boy had never been tested on actual inhabited areas of land. The scientists knew the bombs would do the job, but they had no idea to what extent the bombs would do damage. The Fat Man was a bomb with a plutonium core surrounded by high explosives. The shockwaves from the explosive triggered the splitting of plutonium, a radioactive element. The little boy was made out of uranium-235. The uranium was set off by a small piece of dynamite that fired down into a cup within a barrel. The explosion was the equivalent of 15,000 tons of dynamite. Everything was destroyed within an approximate 1-mile radius of ground zero. The explosion itself destroyed many buildings and killed or injured many people, but it also started many fires which joined together and wreaked havoc on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Hundreds of thousands of people died from the attack. The United States had the belief that they were being heroes. President Truman had decided that a nuclear attack on Japan would force the country to surrender before further actions had to be taken. This act did cause Japan to surrender, but the United States had used 2 nuclear bombs on Japan before it would happen. The United States had the strong belief that a full invasion of Japan would be more destructive than the nuclear power set off by the atomic bombs. Fewer people may have died during this course of action, but that could be because no United States soldiers were killed. The United States was unaware of the effects the atomic bombs would have other than blowing up cities. When Japan surrendered, they were forced to negotiate and then agree on terms with the United States government. The United States and Russia took control of all of the land that the imperial power of Japan acquired after the year 1894. Russia colonized the Kurili Islands and the United States the Ryukyu Islands and Okinawa. The United States and other countries forced Japan to hold war crime trials for their soldiers and commanders. Hundreds of soldiers were executed for their crimes during the war. More than 500 members of the army were too ashamed to go through with the trial and committed suicide to prevent what might come if they were fairly judged for the actions they had in the war. Not only were many of the Japanese soldiers tried for crimes or committed suicide, but the remainder of the army was disbanded. Japan could only organize troops if another nation invaded their island. The imperial power of Japan had been a great military force that had conquered many islands, but they had to revoke their power after a terrible loss. The end of the war caused the imperial power of Japan to restructure their government and abandon the military power that had controlled the government. Without the bombs, Japan would have taken a lot longer to surrender, and they might have even won. The Emperor of Japan had once ruled a great nation. The Emperor after the war had to renounce all of his military and political power. He was meant to be a monarch governing the nation through good times and bad, but the loss of the war turned him into a puppet, controlled primarily by the desires of other countries. The restrictions of the emperor's own powers and many other details of the government were drafted in a constitution. Not all the things written in the constitution were bad for the Japanese. The constitution stated that all citizens of Japan were guaranteed human rights. It was illegal to discriminate against any person in any way. The Constitution also established a House of Representatives and a House of Councilors, who debated the laws and how to solve problems in the countries. The members of the House were elected by the people for the people and without discrimination. The government became a full democracy, which could be good or bad depending on opinion. The surrender of Japan forced the people to reconstruct their government based on suggestions from the United States. The bombings caused burns, disfigurations, and many other physical injuries. Many citizens who were within a 1-mile radius of ground zero had their skin burned off. The skin was hanging off in peels on the sides of their bodies. Some people were burned alive by the firestorms that resulted from the explosions. Besides burning, there were many other basic injuries that occur in any disaster, such as broken bones or fractures. The United States bombed Japan knowing somewhat of the damage that would come. but they were not fully aware of the radiation that would be let off. Radiation from the nuclear bombs caused a sudden rise in certain cancers, especially leukemia. Cataracts in the eyes also became more common. Babies who were born from mothers who had been exposed to radiation were often mutated and brain damaged, which caused early death or difficult lives. The people of Japan also had suffered from extreme mental trauma. They witnessed a bunch of people, friends and family, fall before their eyes. They saw their homes destroyed. The deaths were bloody and unpleasant. All of these things are enough to completely change a person. The bombs destroyed the spirits of Japan. The nuclear bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki destroyed Japan and forced the nation to restructure themselves based on what other country believed was wrong with them. Not only did the bombings force Japan to surrender, but they destroyed cities, homes, and people. Nuclear bombs are an overly destructive force that the United States used to pressure Japan to surrender. The bombs may have saved some physical lives, but the torment they brought to the Japanese minds destroyed the people.